If you had asked me 25 years ago what I thought was the neatest invention thus far in my life, I would have to say it was the microwave oven. Because isn't it amazing to have a cup of coffee that you forgot you had and it gets cold and you still want to have it? All you have to do is stick it in the microwave for about a minute and you got a hot cup of coffee. Also, if there's leftovers in the refrigerator, you don't have to heat up the oven anymore. You just put them in the microwave and in about a minute or so, there they are, a nice warm meal of leftovers. Now, if you were to ask me today what I think the neatest invention is up to this point, I would say without a doubt it has been the GPS systems. Think how many marriages have been saved by the GPS. Think how much anxiety we no longer have to have when we take a trip. All we have to do is punch in our destination and this sweet lady tells us where to go step by step. But GPS systems haven't always been as good as they are today. I buy a car every 25 years. I'm Lutheran. And I still have the Camry that I first bought in 1992. And now I've got a new one. Still got the old one, because that's Ginger's favorite car. She won't buy the new one until I get the first dent in it. That's kind of funny, too, because the other day I noticed a scratch was in it. And the thing about it is, I remember putting it in there myself. So I couldn't fuss at anybody. But anyway, the old GPS system I had, I'd put in the directions that I wanted, and the woman, she was a crab anyway, would only give me one route. Just one route. And if you don't go that route, you're just out of luck. I'm still mad at her. We were going to take a trip several years ago to visit Ginger's sister in Indianapolis. And so we put in the destination to Indianapolis from Marietta. And everything was going fine until we got to Indianapolis. We got on the big roundabout, or the big loop, which is, I think, 465. We got anybody here from Indianapolis? That's a lovely, lovely city, a lovely state, too. Anyway, we got on 465. And the crabby lady says, "Your exit is 267. Get off here or you're going to just be lost." So I got off on exit 67. She said, "And when you get to the bottom of the hill, turn right." Got to the bottom of the hill. It said, "Road closed." I said, "What do I do now?" She said, "I have no idea." Called Ginger's sister and said, "Connie, the road that we are told to go to your house is now closed." She said, "Ronnie, that road has been closed for a year. You should have called me. I'd have told you to take exit 268. My old GPS system is somewhere in a ditch in Indianapolis. I fired that woman. But I got a new one now. In my new Camry, it is awesome. First of all, the woman talking to me is sweeter. She calls me Ronnie. And whenever I want to go somewhere, I'll push destination and she says, "Sweetheart, where would you like to go?" And I tell her and she says, "Don't you worry about a thing." I think she's from the South. She said, "Don't you worry about a thing. I'm going to give you 3 different options for you to make it to your destination." And I'm not joking. I sold 5 Camrys this morning at church. But anyway, I'm not joking. She will give you a preferred route, which is the shortest. Then she will give you another route, which is basically all interstates. And then, bless her heart, she will give you a scenic route. And isn't that neat? And then if you miss a turn, she doesn't say like that other old woman, recalculating. She says, "Darling, you just missed your turn. But don't you worry about it. You just go down to the next exit, get off on that ramp, make a U-turn, and we'll be right back where we need to be. Isn't that sweet? I love my new GPS system. But no matter how hard we might try, no matter what our plans may be for whatever journey we may take, sometimes there is a road that is closed, sometimes there is an interruption, and sometimes we just can't get there according to the GPS. Today in the book of Ruth, Naomi, her life was turned upside down. She had great plans for a life with her husband, Elimelech, and her 2 sons, that they would find wives in Moab and marry them and live happily ever after until the drought was over in Israel. Then they would go back and continue to grow their family, continue to grow their business, continue on with the life that they had planned. But Naomi's life, as we've learned before, was turned completely upside down. Her plans were changed. First of all, her husband died tragically, Elimelech. And then, if matters could not get worse, her 2 sons, both of them, died at a very young age. So there she was as a widow with 2 daughters-in-law and nobody to provide for them. So her journey had to change. My dad always told me, and I think you tell your children this too. You remember my dad, don't you? These lovely people came from Durham, North Carolina. They were members of my home congregation. And what a coincidence that they would end up back here hearing me. So I'm just glad you're here. But anyway, my dad, and they were good friends, always said, Ronnie, you got to have a plan B. And so after Naomi gets over her grief, and you know when you're in the midst of grief, it takes time for your head to clear. You think the world's coming to an end, whatever the tragedy might be, or whatever the change of plans might be. And so you have a period of time where you grieve. Where Naomi grieved for a while. But then one morning she got up and her head was clear. And she came up with plan B. This is plan B. This is what chapter 3 is all about. In Jewish tradition, in order to keep the family tree alive, the widow or the daughters-in-law had to marry a family member of their spouses so that they could have their land and carry on the name of that family. So Naomi said, Ruth, I want you to do this with regards to Boaz, the relative of your father-in-law. And remember when Naomi said, I'm too old to take a husband? She should have been the one looking a new husband, but she said, I'm too old. Well, if she had had the internet, she'd know differently. Every morning on the internet, my email is filled with this statement. There are seniors in your neighborhood who want to meet you. So this is what Nicole and I are going to do. We're going to collect all these emails from these women who want to meet me. And we're going to contact them all at the same time and tell them to meet me here at 10:30 on Sunday morning. Wouldn't that be neat? But anyway, Naomi, she said, I'm too old to find a husband. So I want you to do it, Ruth. And this is how I want you to do it. After Boaz goes to sleep, now Boaz is a relative now of Elimelech. You find out where he's sleeping. Then go take a bath, put on perfume, put on your nicest dress. And after he goes to sleep, go sneak in his bed and lie down next to him at his feet. Now, let me ask you something. If you're an older man and you're sleeping and you turn over in the middle of the night and see something like that laying next to you, you might have a heart attack. My goodness, look at this woman. And Boaz wakes up in the middle of the night. He turns over, and there is beautiful young Ruth. And he's startled, as anybody would, and says, who in the world are you, you beautiful thing? And Well, he didn't say that, but I've ad-libbed it a little bit here. Who are you? And she says, I'm Ruth. You've allowed me to pick grain out of your field. And he said, yes, I know you. You're an honorable woman. You're a great woman. And I would like for you, Ruth says, to redeem me. In other words, to marry me so I can continue the family name and have a life. And Boaz said, well, we have a problem. I am not the closest relative to your father-in-law. There's one other person who is more closely related than I am. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to go to him and tell him if he wants to take you and marry you and redeem you, so be it. If not, I promise that I will marry you. Well, because Beth and I are the way we are, I cannot tell you how Plan B worked out. Pastor Burkholz is going to tell you next week. But what I can tell you is this. If you find yourself having to change your plans, having to reroute your journey through life, the book of Ruth tells us that God will be there as we work through plan B, C, D, E, and F. However many times we have to change our route, the book of Ruth wants us all to know that God will be with us. As far as what happens to Ruth, see you next week. Let us stand.